Ladies and gentlemen, growth happens in silence, not in the spotlight. That's not just a phrase. It's a principle that transforms lives when understood and applied with intention. In this world where everyone wants to be seen, where people measure their worth in likes, shares, followers, and validation, we've lost touch with the sacredness of silence. Silence is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of clarity. It is in silence that our minds calm, our hearts speak, and our spirits begin to awaken. When you are constantly surrounded by noise, constantly broadcasting your every move, constantly performing for the approval of others, you can't hear your own intuition. You can't sense your next move. Growth becomes stunted when it's always seeking applause. Real growth doesn't need to be advertised. Real growth shows up in who you become, not in what you announce. Look at nature. A seed does not grow under spotlights. It grows in darkness, beneath the soil, in silence. No one sees the roots form. No one watches it break through the dirt. The most critical stages of development are hidden from the world. The same is true for your life. The seasons when you feel buried, when you feel unseen, when you're not being celebrated, those are the seasons that shape you. That's where your foundation is laid. You don't grow when the world is watching. You grow when you're alone, grinding in private, healing in silence, building in the dark. The spotlight is for performance. Silence is for preparation. And the truth is, if you haven't built strength in silence, you will collapse under the pressure of the spotlight. In silence, you are not distracted by competition. You are not influenced by comparison. You're not chasing someone else's version of success. You're focused. You're locked in. You begin to understand what really matters to you. You hear your own thoughts. You face your own fears. You wrestle with your own doubts. And in doing so, you develop a level of self-awareness, a level of discipline, a level of resilience that no one can take from you. The spotlight can't give you that. Applause can't give you that. That comes from the inner work, the uncomfortable work, the work that nobody sees but everybody feels when you walk in your power. Most people are in love with being seen but afraid of doing the work in silence. They chase visibility instead of stability. They want recognition without preparation. But growth doesn't work that way. You don't get strong by showing off in the gym. You get strong by lifting when nobody's watching, by pushing yourself when nobody's clapping, by doing one more rep when you feel like quitting. The same applies to your dreams. You don't become excellent by putting your process on display. You become excellent by committing to your process behind the scenes. That's what makes the results undeniable when they finally show. There's a reason why the most impactful people don't talk much about what they're doing. They let their work speak for itself. Their discipline is louder than their declarations. Their consistency is stronger than their announcements. They've learned the power of quiet seasons. They understand that the fruits come later, but the roots are everything, and roots don't grow in the spotlight. Roots grow underground. The deeper the roots, the stronger the tree, and the stronger the tree, the more weight it can carry. The same is true for you. If you want to build something real, something lasting, something meaningful, you need roots. And roots take time. They take stillness. They take silence. It's in the silent moments that you discover who you really are. Not who you pretend to be on social media. Not who you are when others are watching. But who you are when the lights are off, when there's no audience, when it's just you and your thoughts. That's where you get honest with yourself. That's where you break bad habits. That's where you design the life you want to live. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. The world teaches us to shine, but it forgets to teach us to build. And you can't shine for long if you've skipped the building process. People want the crown, but not the cross. They want the stage, but not the solitude. They want the breakthrough, but not the breaking. But there is no elevation without preparation, and there is no preparation without silence. Silence is where you strategize. Silence is where you sharpen your vision. Silence is where you strengthen your faith. The world will always try to pull you into its noise, but growth requires the courage to pull away, to disconnect, to focus, to listen, not to the crowd, but to your calling. You'll find that the more you grow, the less you need to prove. You stop seeking validation. You stop craving attention. You stop needing constant affirmation, because you become rooted in something deeper than approval. You become grounded in purpose. And when you're grounded in purpose, silence is no longer uncomfortable. It becomes empowering. You stop fearing the quiet. You start embracing it. You begin to see it not as isolation, but as incubation. You're not being overlooked. You're being prepared. You're not being ignored. You're being developed. Some of the most significant breakthroughs in history happened when people withdrew from the world and locked in on their mission. From inventors to leaders to artists to athletes, many of them went through a period of silence before their explosion, not because they were hiding, but because they were honing. They were refining. They were sharpening the tools they would one day use to change the world. That kind of growth doesn't come from being busy. It comes from being intentional. It comes from choosing depth over display, focus over flash, mastery over popularity. And don't get it twisted. Silence doesn't mean inactivity. It means inner activity. It means building the kind of inner strength that no one can measure, but everyone will notice. It's about creating momentum in the unseen so that when your moment comes, you are not just ready, you are unstoppable. Too many people rush to be seen before they are stable. They rush into the light before their roots are strong. And when storms come, and they will come, they collapse, not because they lack talent, but because they lacked foundation. You don't have to chase the spotlight to be significant. Your growth is not defined by how visible you are, but by how valuable you become. And value is built in silence. It's built in the early mornings, the late nights, the moments of doubt, the moments of sacrifice, the moments of discipline, when no one is watching and no one is clapping. That's where champions are made. That's where leaders are born. That's where legacies are built. In the silence, in the grind, in the shadows. And when the spotlight finally finds you, it won't change you. It will only reveal who you already are. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It's necessary for transformation. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your energy, your approval, and your time, choosing to focus on yourself is often misunderstood. People will call it selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll wonder why you're so distant. But what they don't understand is that transformation requires separation. Growth demands solitude. And focusing on yourself is not about neglecting others. It's about finally choosing to not neglect yourself. Most people spend their lives pouring into everyone else's cup while walking around empty. They show up for others, support others, encourage others, but when it's time to do the same for themselves, they feel guilt, hesitation, or confusion. That's because we've been conditioned to believe that self-focus is self-centered. That taking care of our own mental health, our own dreams, our own healing is somehow wrong or egotistical. But how can you give your best to the world if you're constantly running on fumes? How can you be a strong support to others if your own foundation is cracked? Focusing on yourself is the beginning of true empowerment. It's where clarity comes in. It's where strength is developed. It's where confidence is born. When you start to pay attention to your inner world, your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, your beliefs, you begin to understand what's been holding you back. You begin to recognize the patterns that keep repeating. You begin to take responsibility for your growth instead of waiting for circumstances to change or people to save you. That shift from blame to responsibility is where transformation begins. You realize that nobody is coming to build your dream for you. Nobody is coming to heal your pain. Nobody is going to hand you the life you want. That's your job. And when you finally stop looking outward and start looking inward, everything changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop seeking answers outside of yourself. Instead, you start asking deeper questions. Who am I becoming? What do I want? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to learn? Focusing on yourself doesn't mean you disconnect from others. It means you reconnect with yourself. It means getting back in tune with your intuition. It means honoring your own voice. It means becoming so rooted in your purpose that the noise of the world can't distract you. It's not about arrogance. It's about alignment. When you're focused on yourself, you begin to attract what's meant for you. You begin to see opportunities that were always there, but you couldn't recognize before because you were too busy being distracted. You begin to create boundaries that protect your peace, your energy, your time. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. And clarity is a powerful thing. When you're clear on who you are and where you're going, you no longer feel the need to explain, to justify, to shrink yourself for the comfort of others. You start to walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with a quiet confidence that comes from doing the inner work. That's what focusing on yourself gives you. It gives you wholeness. It gives you identity. It gives you power. People often say they feel lost, like they're stuck in life, like they don't know what's next. But more often than not, the problem isn't a lack of options. It's a lack of direction. And direction comes from introspection. When you focus on yourself, you begin to see what truly matters. You start to peel away the layers of conditioning, of fear, of doubt, of societal expectations. You stop chasing someone else's version of success. You stop running on autopilot. You begin to create a life that feels authentic, that feels meaningful, that feels yours. It's not an easy process. In fact, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because focusing on yourself means you have to confront the parts of you that are uncomfortable. You have to sit with the wounds you've been avoiding. You have to take accountability for the choices you've made. You have to admit when you've been your own biggest obstacle. But that honesty, that raw confrontation with yourself, is where transformation lies. That's where real change is born, not in denial, not in distraction, but in the mirror. Transformation isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about uncovering what's real. And you can't do that if you're constantly outsourcing your worth, your peace, your identity to external sources. You have to be willing to go within, to unplug from the noise, to break away from the pressure to perform, to sit in silence and ask, what do I need right now? What is this season of my life asking of me? What am I being called to become? When you begin to focus on yourself, your environment starts to shift. Some relationships may fade. Some opportunities may disappear. Some people may no longer relate to you. And that's okay, because transformation often comes with transition. You're not meant to stay in the same place forever. You're not meant to keep repeating the same cycles. You're meant to evolve, and evolution requires a different version of you, a version that's not afraid to outgrow comfort zones, habits, and even people who no longer align with your direction. Focusing on yourself is not a betrayal to others. It's a commitment to your highest potential. It's saying, I love myself enough to stop tolerating less than I deserve. It's saying, I believe in myself enough to invest in my growth. It's saying, I know I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to do the work to become who I was created to be. That kind of commitment is rare, because it requires patience. It requires discipline. It requires saying no to instant gratification and yes to long-term fulfillment. We live in a society that promotes hustle, business, and constant productivity. But what if the real work isn't in doing more, but in becoming more? What if your greatest success isn't in how much you achieve, but in how deeply you transform? That doesn't come from pleasing people. That doesn't come from keeping up appearances. That doesn't come from chasing trends. It comes from slowing down, getting quiet, tuning in, focusing on the person you're becoming. And that journey isn't always linear. Some days you'll feel like you're making progress. Other days you'll feel like you're falling behind. But that's part of the process. Growth is not about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up for yourself even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, because every step you take inward brings you closer to alignment. Every boundary you set, every habit you change, every belief you upgrade, it all adds up. It all matters. The beautiful thing is, the more you focus on yourself, the more you begin to influence others in powerful ways. Not by force, not by preaching, but by being an example of what's possible. People see your peace and want to know how you found it. They see your discipline and wonder where it comes from. They see your growth and feel inspired to start their own. That's the power of transformation. It doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It doesn't need to be broadcast to be real. It simply needs to be lived. So many people are waiting for permission to focus on themselves. They're waiting for the right time. They're waiting for approval. But the truth is, nobody can give you that permission but you. You have to decide that you are worth the effort. You have to believe that your future is worth protecting. You have to trust that the time and energy you pour into yourself will not be wasted. Because it won't. It will multiply. It will compound. It will show up in every area of your life, your relationships, your career, your health, your peace. When you focus on yourself, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop drifting and start directing. You stop surviving and start thriving. And that's when the real transformation begins.